Great. Well, thank you for having me here today. Imagine you released a service, a policy, a report, and it was bigger than the system that currently existed, and everyone wanted it now. How would you feel? Uber did something like that, and we're probably still struggling with some of the challenges at places, but we love it. How would you feel if you released a policy, a system or report or anything else within your current working day where people were jumping for joy and they thought, wow, I've been waiting for this, I'll line up for this? Apple does that. How would you feel if you had a great idea? It was an award-winning idea and you won many ideas that could really change the world. And in fact, perhaps it actually helped children with type 1 diabetes and helped them survive through the nights when perhaps they had a crisis. But people didn't use it. There's a company that experienced that. Why do these things happen? I believe that empathy and the power of empathy is really, really important in making change and innovating. And empathy or not, that last example was really an example where they hadn't considered what everyone was going through every day. So where I'm talking about new shoes, I'm actually talking about other people's shoes. How can you stand in other people's shoes? And what can that do for the ideas that you have and the innovation that you want to make within your job and perhaps outside? Today, I'd like to give you 3 simple tools. Talking to Abby in the lead up for this, she wanted something really practical. So my talk's going to be 3 practical tools that you can use for external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, and for yourself. So there may be things that you've come across, but I hope it's a good refresher and things that you can use later on. As Bill mentioned, I work with organisations that are looking to grow and transform themselves, and I play in the design-led innovation space. I'm also really fortunate to be working with another group called the Catalyst Approach, and they look at making ideas and innovation an everyday way of doing things. You're very fortunate that you have a contact down in Canberra. I just want to mention James Young, and he also heads up the, let me get it right, James, the Collaborative Innovation Forum, and that's really an opportunity for you guys to get together and cross-pollinate. So, what is design thinking? Has anyone heard of design thinking? Great. I come from a scientific background and it really makes sense to me. So, design thinking is a bit different to everyday thinking. If you look at the left-hand side of the screen there, typically in business, as you work every day, you're given a problem and we're expected to go straight to solution. I need this solution now, don't waste my time. In design thinking, we look at that problem, those circles, some that are coloured in, and we think, well, what really is the problem? Let's take a step back and look at that problem in more detail. And this is where empathy really comes into it, so that we look at solving the right problem, not just solving one problem. And then playing in the solution space, and as we understand the solution, we understand the problem even better. I think as people within the public service, you are faced with really wicked problems. So you need to understand the problems to be solved and the right problems to be solved. The other thing in design thinking is that we look at more than probability and probables. Again, every day, if people want you to solve something, you look backwards and you go, well, I think we did it this way last time. Maybe we can build on it this time. By using a design-led innovation space, we don't look at what's worked before. We look at the possibilities. And what if? These are the questions that we ask ourselves. Why and what if? The other thing, as I already mentioned, the right problem. So reframing that problem. Empathy can really help you to reframe the problems that you're solving for the person that matters, the person that you're solving the problem for. It's probably not the efficiency and the convenience that you want, but it's something that they will love and line up for. You guys, as I mentioned, tricky problems. You deal with people every day. You have citizens to look after. And so there's lots there that can be done. And I believe empathy is a key way to get into that space. The other thing about design thinking is it's a creative way of doing things. Both the speakers today have mentioned how important it is for us to remain creative and think about what is creativity. I always thought that I wasn't creative. As I mentioned, I come from a science background. I was science, maths, very analytical. But I think when you think about it more, we do experiment, as Ian Chubb mentioned. And creativity is looking at things, but seeing them differently to other people and trying out things. Again, asking those why questions. So 3 tools today that I want to share with you, and very much based in empathy. But why is empathy so hard? Why is it? And it's because people don't do what they say. We will say something, but we'll do something else. So that makes it really hard to understand how can we get close to these people, not to sympathize with them, but to understand what they really need. And it's all embedded in our brains. And you guys probably know this better than I do. But really, typically, what you see on the surface is what is happening in our neocortex. That's our logic. If you're going to cross the road, you push the button, you wait for the walk sign, and you cross the road. But what is really going on is the stuff in our limbic system, the middle brain there. This part of the brain doesn't have language, but it's where our deepest emotions come from. It's where that feeling, if someone comes up to you and says something and you don't feel safe, that feeling of not feeling safe is coming from our limbic system. It's where we do things because they just feel right. And this is what you have to tap into to really understand what your customers and your consumers need and what they will embrace. So it's a bit like looking at an iceberg. We see the stuff that comes, that logical stuff is on the surface of the water. They are the things that we do every day. But underneath the water are the beliefs and values. And that's what is needed to be tapped into. So let's look at some of the tools. And I hope that you'll be able to take them away. I have some of the templates I'll be running through today. I have given to Abby, who is kind of going to put them up on your intranet site if you'd like to use them. They're very easy to reproduce at any rate. Who has to deal with internal stakeholders? God, I thought everyone would put their hand up for that one. Who feels that they need to nurture their stakeholders? Yeah. We all really need to nurture and to understand. So there's and often we don't think about it, we try to put forward an idea and perhaps it doesn't work. Or we know that there's people that are very positive about what we want to do and are helping us to nurture the whole ecosystem that we work in. So this is just a really simple tool to put it down on paper and help you work through your projects and your everyday. You may not be on a project, but perhaps even just interacting with your colleagues, it might be something that will help you. So if you think about stakeholders are the ones that will link you together and drive your project. When you think about them, what is their point of view? Do you ever think about their point of view? Everyone has that point of view, and as I mentioned in the limbic system, have you ever gone into someone's office and say, I've got this great idea, and their initial response is, no, it won't work. Or perhaps it's yes, it will. But it's that initial response about, am I safe? What am I going to lose if this comes up to my personal role? And so you need to think about their point of view. What's happening? What are they feeling? And how do you do this? You need to talk to them and engage with them in a way that you can bring out how they're feeling and where they feel safe. Then it's really to understand what impact and influence. So as stakeholders, you can work together. If they understand what your plan is and where you want to go, they are a great force for pushing things forward. So don't underestimate the power of your colleagues. Do they have a positive or negative outlook on what you're trying to do? And what would they lose if they're successful? People forget that change and innovation, while it's great and we want to do new things, it always represents some idea of loss. And it's very important to remember that, because sometimes the loss is where it might get stopped, because people can't face and can't see the difference between where you're going and what they're going to lose. So the tool, I promised you a tool. Very simple table. Just list your stakeholders, people that could influence your project. They may be individual names of people, or they may be groups of people within your organisation. Think about how much interest they have in what you're doing. If from a ranking scale of 0 to 10, where would they sit if 10 was the maximum? Then think about the impact they could have on your project being successful. Again, rank them from 0 to 10. And go and talk to them and think about their point of view so that you understand what is the type of information they need to build their interest and positive impact. Quick example, you can see there's a combination of individual names or a combination, or also a team. And people have different points of view. So this is just a really simple way of putting it down. When you're doing your projects, you might want to do this initially and then change it as you go through. Then a great way to make it real for you is to plot it. Just very easily plot those rankings you gave out of 0 to 10. Plot it on a 2 by 2, and then you can see where people sit. Green, perhaps, are people that are positive. Red, perhaps people that are negative. And blue, ones that are neutral. So put them in, and then it's very easy to see where you have to go. The key area where you want the greens to sit is your 10-10s. You want people that have an interest of 10 and an impact of 10. But not everyone's going to have that. Really important that you try to change your red blocks to green blocks. How do you do that? Have some conversations with them. Think about where they're coming from. Remember, it's their point of view and what that could mean for your project, or how you can enlighten their point of view. Then also look at the other areas, particularly people that have high interest and low impact. How can you enable them to have more impact in your project? Or perhaps people that have low interest, high interest, and low impact. Sorry, I just said that before. So people that have low interest, let me get this right. People that have low interest and high impact, or people that have high interest and low impact. Pardon. So think about how you can move them up into the 10-10 quadrant. There's some things that you can do. Maybe it's meeting with them. Maybe it's regular emails. Maybe it's just newsletters. It really depends what their point of view is and what they need to understand what you're trying to do. Empathy is about understanding, and it's a two-way street. So that's the internal stakeholders. Think about how you can keep them informed. Think about how you can keep them satisfied. And of course, the 10-10s, put your maximum effort in those, particularly if you need to change them from negative to positive. All the time, think about their point of view. And remember, the sweet spot is what is relevant. What is relevant to you and your project, and also what is relevant to them. So they're key things with your internal stakeholders, and I'll hope they'll help you. External stakeholders, you guys have many. The citizens of Australia look towards the Australian public system to help us move forward and to create a better world and shape Australia. Many people out there, and they range in having to interact with the simplest and the most complex things. So how do you get those people jumping for joy? How do you get the Uber taxi experience? In design-led innovation, the empathy and the customer really stands at the heart of everything that we do. And I think within the public system, this also often happens and needs to happen more. This is a diagram from the UK, and Mike Bracken was talking about how typically, or perhaps an old process, the user was really considered a long way down in the process. Where we need the user to be considered the consumer or the citizen is really at the front end. And that's how we can change the way things are done. So again, it doesn't start with your convenience. It's about what people want today and how you can shape a better world for themselves. How do you get into the minds of people? This is tricky, but there's some simple tools, and today I want to show you a tool called the persona. Does anyone use personas today? Great. They're simple but very powerful, and it really helps you to build empathy. These tools are about just changing slightly the way that you think. By building personas, you really get into the motivations and the goals of your users. So a bit different to market segmentation. Often we do market segmentation, which is things like demographics. They're a female, 45 to 70. They live in Western Sydney. That's demographics only. But with personas, we look at their goals and their motivations and what makes them tick. The closer we can get to them, the more we understand them. Now, it's not about sympathy, as I mentioned before. Sympathy is where, you feel sorry for someone, and in a way, you're judging because you feel sorry. Empathy is non-judgmental, and it's an understanding about how they could react to something and also what they need, and really getting into their limbic system. So it's getting to know your citizen, which of course, again, you need to talk to them. You need to understand what they could be saying, what they could be doing, and even better, what you believe they're thinking and feeling in any given situation. So if I can charge you to get out of your office and away from your desk and start talking to some of the citizens that you're building services and reports and policies for, that is the best way that you can understand this. So I hope if you take nothing else today, please go out and get out of your comfort zone and talk to the people that you're working for. So personas really humanize the people involved. They're very simple. You can see some examples there where you can summarize what are the key components of this persona that are important for your project. A lot of people say to me, all my people or the customers I serve are unique. But if you think about it, there will be connections between the people that you are building these things for. There are connections around perhaps their demographics. There are connections around what are the things and the jobs that they're trying to get done. So try to build those connections and build a few personas for your project. I was very fortunate enough to work for Cochlear, and of course we've got Peter and Jim here today. And we use personas a lot in the projects that I was using. The joy of that was that we knew where we were going. We knew who we were serving. And as a large multidisciplinary team, we also used them to help us make decisions. So when my project manager came up to me as developing software, he'd say, oh, look, Jane, the guys have got something really cool today. We think we should put it in the software. And I'd sort of say, well, do you think Hamati needs that? And he'd go, no, probably not. And so there's a really good way to use personas and create decisions, make decisions that are not personal about what you want, but about what your customers want. So what makes your citizens tick? How do they get to their decisions? And how can you use these personas every day? Another client that I know has Wendy. And Wendy is now a full-size cardboard cutout and goes to every meeting with Nigel. So as they're having their meetings, talking about the things that matter to them, they also think about, does it matter to Wendy? So a really powerful tool that keeps everyone focused. It's about looking at things from their perspective. When we did activity like this in the healthcare system, I was working with one of the hospitals, and we came to building personas and journey maps. And one of them said to me afterwards, she said, and these guys are nurses. They have a lot of empathy. She said, "Oh, Jane, you know, that persona really flipped me from thinking about our efficiency, our productivity, and our convenience, and it really placed me in the world of the patient." So use an easy tool and get into the shoes of your customer, the shoes of your consumer and citizen. Think about what their perspective on the world is. Uber thought about that. Everyone probably catches taxi at some point in time. I know for me, the hardest things about taxi was the uncertainty. Would one come? Actually, have they even picked up my order? And how much is it going to cost? Uber took the uncertainty out of taxis because they knew that was what we needed. This is another example of really getting into understanding the persona. This is a case study from the US, came out of the Stanford D School. They wanted to build low-cost humidicribs, particularly for mothers in Nepal. Too many babies were dying because they couldn't get to a humidicrib. So the team went out there initially and they thought, yep, we'll just build a low-cost humidicrib. But when they spoke to the mothers and the people involved, they realised that actually that wasn't going to help with anything, because the hospitals that would buy the low-cost humidicribs were still too far away for the mothers to get their baby there. What they really needed was something that mothers could easily use and the clinics within the villages could also easily use. So it really changed the way that they faced the problem. They were ensuring that they were facing and solving the right problem. It wasn't about low cost, it was about access. So how do you build personas? I mentioned already, there's a lot of talking. Get away from your desk. Go outside and talk to a few people. Talk to them about the project and what you're interested in, and share it. Some of the things that's come up this morning is really around co-designing. We need to engage with our stakeholders more, our external stakeholders, and think about what they want. It's no longer good enough to keep what we're doing close to our chest. Get out there early and learn. Think about the threads that connect your consumers together and your citizens. Think about the threads that you could build personas around them. What are their common motivations? What jobs are they trying to get done that you could help them with? And build out your personas in that way. This is the template that I've given to Abby. This is a really quick way of just getting some ideas around what are the things that are important to personas. So you can see some of the headings there are really about their family. It's about their personal goals, their professional motivations. It's about what they think about themselves. That quote about what people think about themselves is so powerful. The quote about what your family and friends think about you is also really powerful and shows you the essence of people's motivations and drivers. So this is a really quick way to build out some information and then summarize it into something beautiful, perhaps more beautiful than this. But this is an example of a nurse that we were working on, again with a hospital system. And you can see there that what we've captured are the things that are really important to Linda. And that's where the innovation had to come around. It was from the things that were very important to Linda, not what was important to ourselves. And you can see that quote that I mentioned, my job works well in my life as long as I can get home in time for the kids. That's quite real. I think there's a lot of people that probably think like that. But it really gives you focus about what's important to Linda. Personas are then further extended into journey maps, which I'm not going to go into today. But this is where you can actually see what happens to your persona as they potentially interact with you now or even in the future. So you can build journey maps for the current reality and also futuring. So use those, and they're more than process maps. They're what's happening now, they're what's happening before, and what after. Often a lot of people find that the gem is actually in the before. Working with an emergency department down in Wollongong, they were looking at the mental health patient in ED. And what they discovered from the journey map was that mental health patient should never actually get to ED. The problem wasn't what they were doing in ED and the disruption they potentially caused, but it was the fact that they turned up to hospital. So journey maps, very powerful tool. Again, not for you, not for your convenience efficiency, but for what people want. So in my last 10 minutes, I wanted to do a quick exercise with you. This is where you can use some of the empathy that you've gained through either your internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, and a little bit of a tool with how you could communicate what you're doing. It's based around the problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? It's how is what you're doing, and the benefit is what are you actually delivering for that person that has the problem. So what I'd like you to do is actually just write down quickly what you believe the problem is that you're working on today, and what is the benefit that you're delivering. Give you 2 seconds. Okay. Now I'd like you just to turn to the person next to you and use the format, you know how, there's a problem, well I, and that means. All right, turn to the person next to you and tell them what you're doing. Go. Okay. So a quick little exercise which is really handy, and think about it when you're moving more into what is the empathy that I need to have for this project, for whom? When you're talking to different people, think about what's important to them. It's a great little pitch tool that can bring together the empathy that you have and that what you've built into what you're doing today. So I said a new pair of shoes will help your projects for success. It's actually someone else's shoes, which I guess is new to you. But do play in the empathy space and make the most of it. You may be doing it now, do more of it. As I said, get away from your desk. It's about the people that you serve. And we all serve people in some way. You can only understand people if you feel them in yourself. John Steinbeck, a great novelist. So keep that in mind. And if you think you're too small, I love this quote, think about that mosquito as you go down. Even if it's that pitch statement, you're really bringing out the essence of what you're doing. So I'll leave you with one more question. Whose shoes will you stand in tomorrow? Make it great. Thank you.
Thanks for that. It was a very interesting talk. I'm just wondering about how you go from the particular case studies of the personas to the linking across people, because you're not so much collecting data as kind of getting sort of snapshots of these sort of particular personalities. So what's the kind of linking mechanisms that you use to extrapolate what your bigger customer slash stakeholder base is like?
So do you mean making sure it's true?
Yep.
Yeah. Very important that you actually go out, you should be able to build personas from your own expertise in-house. You know the people that you're working with and potentially who you're innovating for. But it's really important to go out and talk to them and to actually understand, have we got it right? You'll be surprised after a few conversations. That may just be observing, or it may be semi-structured and contextual inquiry, where you're looking at what they're doing in a situation that perhaps you're trying to solve and understand what challenges they have. You'll be really surprised how your expertise is pretty much on the money. It surprises me every time. We start with a fictional persona, and when we go out there, it's very real. The things that aren't right will come up very quickly. So you've got to get out there and observe and talk to people to make sure that it's real. It's not meant to be a fairy tale, that's for sure. Thank you.
I hear what you're saying about getting out of your desk, and I mean, I couldn't agree more. But I guess in the reality of being in the public sector, particularly at the moment when everything's being downsized and every boss knows where every staff member is, do they all know where you are today? Okay. So is there a way to, at times like this when everything's so tight, is there a way to engage with your stakeholders or your clients through digital media and get those personas in a meaningful way, do you think, or is that just too hard?
I think when you're building personas and really looking at journey maps, you have to talk to real people. There's a real difference between quantitative surveys and digital surveys and really the qualitative work. You could certainly use digital media to get people to comment, but I wouldn't fall back to a market research questionnaire. You guys are fortunate that you're working for everyday Australians. So while you might need to be at your desk during the office hours, there's plenty of time when they're walking in the street. So it's a bit different if you were doing something that was specifically for a neurosurgeon where you had to go and find them. But often your people should be fairly accessible. At the soccer game, around the barbecue, there's very easy ways. So digital, probably not so much, James, because it's about real people and getting into that limbic, under the water reasoning. And to do that, you have to ask how questions and why questions and let them take you through on stories that they have to understand their motivations, which is a bit tricky if it's digital media. Thanks.